Hello everyone, Tom with Capo Fetish. Today on the channel we're going to talk about perfect hybrid pop albums with jazz leanings. I'm going to start off here with a fine album from 1982, the first solo album by this artist, Donald Fagen's The Nightfly. His first solo album after Steely Dan broke up that first time in the early 80s. So we got 8 perfect songs on here, all right? And Donald Fagen pretty much sums up the album here in the liner notes. And Donald says, the songs on this album represent certain fantasies that might have been entertained by a young man growing up in the remote suburbs of a northeastern city during the late 50s and early 60s. One of my general height, weight, and build. So all those songs are kind of sort of autobiographical, I would say. The first track on the album, IGY, kind of highlights this whole concept. What a beautiful world it can be. What a glorious time to be free. Highlighting those early 60s feelings for most Americans, the JFK era. So IGY, and that's just one of many great tracks. We got Greenflower Street. He does a cover of Ruby Baby. Side 1 ends with just a fantastic, beautiful a ballad called Maxine. Side 2 is even better, I think. New Frontier is a great pop song. The title track, The Nightfly, the Goodbye Look is fantastic with that little bit of that marimba going on in there. And then it ends with Walk Between Raindrops. Just a fantastic pop album with jazz leanings. So, 1982, Donald Fagen, The Nightfly, fantastic record. One of my favorite albums of all time. I put this album in my top 10. To me, when you talk about the word seamless, this is the album that defines the word seamless. It's perfect. Talking about Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark. This is her first real move away from like the folk vibe she was presenting on her previous albums. A little bit of jazz leanings would pop up in like For the Roses and maybe even Ladies of the Canyon. But here she's abandoning pretty much folk itself. There's folk pop. There's jazz pop on here. Every track is amazing. She's got ace session players on here from LA. She's got Tom Scott on woodwinds, Larry Carlton on guitar, Max Bennett on bass, Joe Sample on electric piano. We have special guests on here like Jose Feliciano. We have Robbie Robertson, and even Crosby and Nash, not Stills. Crosby and Nash make an appearance, and even Cheech and Chong on the last track, Twisted. So, where do you start with this album? Every track is amazing. When I was young, I first heard this album. My sister brought it home. I remember the first time she put it on the turntable. I remember being blown away by Help Me, Free Man in Paris. All these songs are very accessible. People's Parties, same situation. Side 2, Just Like This Train is amazing. Car on a Hill, that midsection where she's doing all those like a cappella vocals, all those different harmonies, just incredible. Troubled Child, it's just a perfect record. And then she would go on with more jazz leanings on like The Hissing of Summer Lawns and on and on. So this is kind of the start of it. And I think this is, for me, the highlight of Joni Mitchell's career here. This is like the Mount Everest of Joni Mitchell albums. It's perfect all the way through. The arrangements, the harmonies she does with herself throughout the album. It's just an incredible album. Court and Spark, Joni and Mitchell from 1974. The debut album from Everything But the Girl is a great hybrid album. There's a little bit of jazz pop, jazz folk pop, whatever you want to call it, but it's all over this album. It's called Eden. And from the first track already, you hear the jazz influences going on here on each and every one. Crab Walk is an instrumental jazz piece. You've got Bittersweet Tender Blue. It's just a great hybrid of like folk rock, jangle pop, little bit of like soft jazz. It's just a fantastic record featuring the amazing vocals of Tracy Thorn. I think she has one of the most gorgeous voices. Her and her husband, Ben Watt, write all the songs. I remember seeing them on their Language of Life tour at the Wiltern in 1990. It was an amazing show. This album also was featured with a different track list in the U.S. The album in the U.S. was just called Everything But the Girl. The second side right here, is a completely different track listing than the UK counterpart, Eden. I think maybe they wanted to appear more to a US audience. These are more kind of jangle pop type tracks there on side 2. But I think Eden takes the cake, though, for the definitive version of this album. It's just a great mixture of a lot of different styles, and highly recommended if you've never heard it. You must hear Tracy Thorn's voice. If you've never heard Everything But the Girl, she's amazing. So Eden by Everything But the Girl from 1984, their debut album, Everything But the Girl. Got to throw this one in. This may have been the first album I ever heard in my entire life in diapers when I was crawling around on the floor at my parents' house in Canoga Park, California. I'm talking about Whipped Cream and Other Delights by Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. I'm sure anybody who was born in the 60s, 70s, heard this album at some point. The cover is an absolute iconic image. The hit on here was his version of Taste of Honey, the instrumental version. But I remember my mom walking around the house, and she didn't listen to music much, but she loved this album. And I remember this thing just blaring through the house in the late 60s, early 70s. It was on the turntable nonstop. So just a fantastic kind of iconic pop culture album here. Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, Whipped Cream and Other Delights. There really is not a bad track on here. And it's a really uplifting album from a completely different era. Another one. Now, Stevie Wonder was on a roll in the 70s. He had about 4 or 5 albums that were just absolutely fantastic. I'm highlighting this one here because not a lot of people talk about this one as much as like Songs to the Key of Life and Inner Visions. I'm talking about Fulfilling This First Finale from 1974. This is a fantastic Stevie Wonder album with a lot of jazz influence in there, especially with that first track, Smile Please. You got tracks like Creepin', which is just absolutely gorgeous. I've heard other jazz artists cover this track. And side 1, oh, it's so beautiful. You've got hits on here like Boogie on Reggae Woman, which was a huge hit. Too Shy to Say. Heaven is 10 zillion light years away is another gorgeous track. Another hit on here was You Haven't Done Nothing. It Ain't No Use. Bird of Beauty. Please Don't Go. A fantastic kind of hybrid album of soul, jazz, pop, rock. Stevie was just on a roll back in this period here between like, say, 72 through 77. The guy just could do no wrong. This is a fantastic album. If you've never heard it, check it out. Stevie Wonder's Fulfilling This First Finale from 1974. Got to throw this one in. This is a great example of a hybrid album with jazz leanings. This is Eli and the 13th Confession by Laura Nyro. Just an absolute perfect album, very influential. I don't know what else could be said about it. I've said much about it over the past few years in other videos. Songs like Lucky and Poverty Train are just mind-blowing tracks. There really was nobody since like Laura Nyro. Her writing style, her arrangements, her voice, very influential too to Joni Mitchell. I've read in several publications. Joni Mitchell was very influenced by her. But yeah, this is just a fantastic record. Laura Nyro from 1968, Eli and the 13th Confession. A must-have for any collection. From 1985, quite a departure from their previous album, Working with Steel, I think it was called. I can't think of the title right now, but I'm talking about China Crisis, their album called Flaunt the Imperfection. They brought on Walter Becker from Steely Dan to produce this album, and you can hear little Steely Dan influences throughout this album, like with the arrangements, the horn arrangements, and just like chord changes and everything. It's really a fantastic album, really a departure from their previous album. The first track, The Highest High, is fantastic. Black Man Ray, Gift of Freedom, King of the Catholic Style, Bigger the Punch I'm Feeling. Nobody really talks about this album. I don't think it was a real huge hit here, at least in the US. Did get maybe a little bit of airplay. I did see them live at the Palace in Hollywood during this tour, and it was a fantastic show. Just a great mixture of like new wave, synth pop, jazz, light jazz. Really, really good stuff here. China Crisis, Flaunt the Imperfection from 1985. And I think that other album was called Working with Magnet and Steel. Please fill it in the comments section. I forgot what the title was, but it was a completely different kind of sound to this album here. They really made a huge leap here with this album here, China Crisis, Flaunt the Imperfection from 1985. A really fantastic album from 1971 that no one hardly ever talks about, and every track on here is amazing. It's Brian Auger's A Better Land, Brian Auger and the Bolivian Express. Now, Brian Auger, full-on jazz rock, Hammond B3 organ player. He has an amazing discography, and most of his albums are more kind of the jazz rock, jazz fusion. But this one here, I think he was taking a detour and maybe trying for a little more commercial appeal. These songs, these are all just songs with verses and choruses and middle eights, and it's a complete departure from albums like, say, Second Wind and Closer to It. There's these amazing double-tracked harmony vocals throughout every song, which adds this really amazing ethereal vibe to the whole album. They're highly reverbed, and they're just amazing sounding. The first track is absolutely amazing. It just sucks you into this album. It's called Dawn of Another Day. Absolutely amazing. Songs like Trouble, Women of the Seasons. There's a track on here that should have been a huge hit called Tomorrow City. Another great song called Fill Your Head with Laughter. Another amazing track called On Thinking It Over. Every song is accessible, catchy. Of course, a lot of jazz leanings throughout this album, but there's some pop in here. There's some rhythm and blues. But it's just an absolutely fantastic album. I highly recommend it if you've never heard this album. A Better Land by Brian Auger and the Bolivian Express from 71. Another just absolute 5-star album, Van Morrison's Moondance from 1970. And this is another example of just a perfect album all the way through. There's rhythm and blues, there's jazz, there's soul. Stone Me, Moondance, of course, has been played throughout, classic rock history. Crazy Love. I think one of my all-time favorite Van Morrison tracks is Caravan. His version on The Last Waltz with Robbie Robertson playing behind him in the band is just absolutely amazing. Pulled it up on YouTube. So amazing. I think one of his best tracks ever, Into the Mystic, is just absolutely amazing. Side 2, Come Running, These Dreams of You, Brand New Day, Everyone, Glad Tidings. This is what you call an absolute perfect, seamless record. From 1970, Moondance by Van Morrison. And we've got another one. I could have put any in here by this band, but I think this one really represents a really good hybrid of pop, rock, and jazz. And I'm talking about Katy Lied by Steely Dan. I could have held up Asia, but I like this one even more than Asia. This is their 4th album that came out in 1975. There's tracks on here that are absolutely just screaming jazz influences, jazz leanings. Dr. Wu, Your Gold Teeth 2, Bad Sneakers, featuring one of the greatest guitar solos ever by Walter Becker. In fact, the first 2 tracks on here feature Walter Becker on lead guitar. Black Friday, Bad Sneakers. I love the coda on Throwback the Little Ones, the way the song ends. It's such a great way to end a perfect record. Everyone's Gone to the Movies. Chain Lightning, featuring some cool guitar work by Rick Derringer. Any World That I'm Welcome To. Rose Darling's a great pop track, so I'm highlighting this one today out of the Steely Dan discography of great pop albums with jazz leanings. So there you go, just a sample of about 10 albums there in that kind of framework. Let me know what other ones you want to put in the comment section. Throw them in the comment section. As always, thanks for watching. If you dig the content across this channel, please press subscribe. I'd appreciate it, as always. And we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.